welcome back to the Mountain View Chamber of Commerce's continuing Back to Business series, where we cover topics and invite experts to help businesses on the road to recovery. I'm joined by Dawn Mayer and Courtney Bennett of the Chamber team and several members of the Kaiser Permanente team who are our primary speakers today. In this session, Kaiser Permanente is providing a virtual briefing on an amazing resource, their Return to Work Playbook. It provides useful tools for you and your stakeholders to make the workplace as safe as possible for employees and clients, and it's totally free. Before we get started, some quick rules of the road. You are all on mute, but if you have questions, please enter them into the chat box and we will do our best to incorporate them into the conversation. And just a quick reminder too, that this is about workplace preparedness and not medical treatments. Although if you do have questions on those, we will try and note them for follow-up. With that, I'd like to introduce Dee Burris, Assistant Medical Group Administrator, and Tony Borba, Human Resources Leader.
Hi, can you hear me? It's wonderful to be here. I'm assuming that I can be heard if someone can flag and say yes. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, great. So thank you for inviting us. I am not sure who is the broader audience, but I wanted to share a little bit about Mountain View's presence in Kaiser Mountain View's presence in downtown Mountain View. As many of you are aware, we've been a part of downtown Mountain View for about 30 years or more, and we spend a lot of time trying to add value to our community. We've shown support for the city of Mountain View by assisting with the seasonal women's and children's homeless shelter. We have provided health screenings and education for them. We've sponsored meals and dinners. We participate in community activities like the parades and events, art and wine festivals. We support our local restaurants for meal catering. You know, we're in the middle of Castro Street, and the dining has continued to be something that lifts the spirits of our staff and physicians here, and so we have several of your vendors that assist us with providing meals or catering meals for our meetings. Some of the services that we provide here at Mountain View are primary care services, so obstetrics, OBGYN, pediatrics, and adult medicine. We have behavioral health services, we have optical services, dermatologic services, that's skin care and skin conditions, health education, our ancillary services, laboratory, radiology, and pharmacy, and we have member services and release of information. And so, as you know, Kaiser Permanente has a broad spectrum of services, and those services that we do not provide here, we are one of 4 satellite offices linked to the Santa Clara Medical Center main campus, and that is on Homestead and Lawrence Expressway. And so for those areas such as our specialty care services, such as orthopedics, neurology, cardiology, so forth, inpatient care, emergency services, and etc., they are provided by our home site facility at Homestead. So that's us in a nutshell. And again, we love being part of the Mountain View family, and look forward to supporting you any way you feel you need.
All right, thanks, Dee. This is Tony Borba. I'm the HR Director for the Santa Clara service area. And just from an HR perspective of looking ahead, there's really 3 areas that I want to touch on. One is our physical plant, and then change management and flexibility, and finally emotional support for our facilities. So we had a program called Building Space Activation Program, and we had 4 teams of facility engineers, union representatives, leaders that walked through all of our medical office buildings and hospital throughout our service area. And what they were looking for is building capacity to assure compliance with county and KP social distancing standards, consistent approach to signage and social distancing markings, workstations and office social distancing, corridor travel to assure social distancing, surface cleaning in common areas and high touch points, and common area configurations like lobbies, restrooms, where, waiting rooms, conference rooms where we have people that would normally come together. The outcome of the joint walkthroughs were detailed with a work list, and again, to assure compliance with the county and KP standards. And this was done at the beginning of June that we did that as an organization. And this was in anticipation of reopening, right, of having our members coming back into the facility and our employees coming back into the facility. So change management flexibility from an HR perspective. I think anyone that's a business owner has, been trying to understand the public health requirements, from a city perspective, county, state, federal, and creating policies and being flexible, I think, and obviously that's going to continue as we move through this. One of the things that changed dramatically is how our members access care from us, and it went from primarily walk-in office visits to up to 95% of video and telephone visits. And so that has changed how our physicians and staff are interacting with their patients, right? And so those workflows that I talked about with the physical plant, all of that has to go into consideration, again, as we are moving forward. One of the things that we saw that a lot of people started working from home. And I think everyone anticipated, back in March and April that by this time in the summer, everybody would probably be back in their traditional roles back in the office. Obviously, that hasn't been the case. And there's many roles that may never come back into the office, and you're probably experiencing that out in the community also. And so that's been a dramatic change for us. And as you can imagine, we're a very unionized organization, and so working conditions is a big deal when an employee is going to be working in a different environment, a different site. So that has definitely been challenging and will continue to be something that we're working on. And then just our workflows, our traditional workflows, we have greeters at every entrance that now that people can come through, and the majority of our entrances into our facilities are closed, and we only have one or two entrances into each of our facilities, and there's greeters and screeners, and that is a workflow that has to be managed 24/7 or when the facility is open. So that's been challenging. Satellite, and that's for our MOBs too, right? So our medical office buildings also are having to do those same type of screenings. Also how we, prepare our patients in the hospital for surgeries, right? There's been a lot of change and extra testing that has to be done because of COVID, and that has also been challenging for us. And then lastly, I want to talk about emotional support for our employees, and I think this is going to be ongoing moving forward. Dee talked a little about our mental health support, and not just for our members, and all of our employees are members, right? So we definitely have that, but we also have, employee assistance programs. So our EAP has been, as you can imagine, very busy, and that's a great resource for our employees. But we've also given additional days off if a employee is COVID positive. And then also just encouraging employees to take time off to spend with their families and to take a respite for themselves, I think is really important and will continue to be moving forward. So that is what I wanted to cover, and sort of looking forward and how we're planning and continuing to move forward. So from here, I'd like to introduce our next two speakers. And First is Jennifer Costello, and Jennifer is a workforce health consultant at Kaiser Permanente and partners with organizations to develop well-being strategies and create a culture of health. She is currently based in Manteca, California, but grew up in the heart of Silicon Valley in Santa Clara, where she started her public health journey by obtaining a health science degree at San Jose State. She holds a master's of public health from Cal. Also joining us is Brianne Jackson, and Brianne is also a workforce health consultant here in Northern California. As an experienced health and wellness professional, Brianne is passionate about helping individuals understand the important role that each element of our total well-being plays in our everyday lives. With over 13 years of experience working with individuals and organizations to enhance and implement health and well-being program strategies, she is dedicated to helping people along their path to optimal health. She earned a master's degree in public health with an emphasis in health promotions from Cal State Fresno, and has used her education experience in roles such as wellness director for Fresno Unified School District, as a health promotions consultant for HealthNet, and now as a workforce health consultant for Kaiser Permanente. So take it away, Jennifer and Brianne.
Thank you so much, Tony. This is Jennifer. I just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen and can hear me. And let me know if that's not the case here. But thank you everyone for joining us today. Brianne and I are really excited to share Kaiser Permanente's what we call the Next Normal Return to Work Playbook. And so just to give some background, and thank you so much, Tony, for sharing, what Kaiser has been doing to support employees, and Dee, what Kaiser has been doing to support communities these last few months here. But what we wanted to do today was to share the playbook. It really is intended to serve as a resource guide for folks, in business to help with returning to work. A little bit about the playbook is that it is about 100 pages long and is being continued to be updated regularly. And so today what we wanted to do, because we don't have the time to go over every single slide or every single page, is Brianne and I will go over highlights of each chapter. And so really the playbook was created for groups, for consultants, for the community really, to keep people safe, and how can we best keep everyone safe during this time. So I'll actually take the first couple of chapters before I pass it over to Brianne. But when you go into the playbook, and we'll share with Courtney and the team the link to that playbook so that you can have access to it. But once you look into the playbook, you'll see that it is divided into various chapters. So the first two chapters are related to physical health. The first one speaking to modifying workplace safety plans for COVID. So really similar to what Tony shared earlier about what Kaiser has been doing to make modifications and adjustments in the workplace. So really providing some guidance and pulling from trusted resources like the CDC or OSHA or EEOC, and making sure this could be a resource that you can look to as you're planning for returning to work for you and your groups and for you and your employees. The second chapter has to do with COVID-19 testing and returning to work safely. And so as Peter mentioned before, Brianne and I are not clinicians, and so we might not be able to speak to some of the medical or clinical questions related to COVID and the science of COVID and that nature. But we do have a chapter dedicated to things regarding testing and how folks can return to work safely. Chapter 3 focuses on mental health and emotional well-being. Both Tony and Dee spoke about the importance of supporting employees, especially during this time when there are a lot of stressors that folks may be experiencing. And so Chapter 3 will go into the resources that are available to your employees, or that resources that you can lean on for some support. Chapter 4 is really interesting. At Kaiser, we really understand, the importance of social drivers of health. And so Brianne will go into what exactly that means and the impact of COVID-19 on social drivers of health. The next few chapters will cover HR policies. So understanding what adjustments have to be made when it comes to some of the policies related to maybe sick leave, leave of absence, and those types of details are in Chapter 5. Chapter 6 will look at the federal and local regulatory and legislative guidance. So this chapter will, because Kaiser is in certain regions, we have pulled various information for folks to refer to when it comes to different regions that Kaiser is located in, but also a list of the federal regulatory and legislative guidance so that you can easily reference that as well. The last chapter looks at industry spotlights, and so some of those examples might be restaurants or essential businesses, retail, manufacturing, hospitality. And so again, Brianne will go into that chapter in a little bit more detail once we get to that point. So next, you'll see here that we wanted to share some additional context to the playbook and how it was divided. And so I went through each of the chapters, and this is another way, I would say, of looking at how the chapters are organized. And so as mentioned, we have the physical health piece, looking at workplace safety, testing, and return to work. And then again, mental health and emotional health, and then understanding the importance of social health. All of this being impacted by policies and the environment. So that's where the HR policy chapter comes in along with the regulations. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. Again, during this time, I think what we'll do is take a couple of minutes to go into each chapter, and then there will be time for Q&A at the end. But in a nutshell, so each chapter, what I wanted to do was take you through almost a tour of what you can find in each chapter. So chapter 1, again, is called Modifying the Workplace Safety Plans for COVID-19. Each chapter, what you'll find is an overview of the issue, some market information, along with guidance from leading agencies like the CDC and OSHA, along with some Kaiser resources to help support. With chapter 1 focusing on physical workplace, the information that you'll find here, and again, we couldn't include every single slide because it would, there's a lot of content in there, but just to speak to some of the resources that you'll find in chapter 1, are strategies to lower the risk of transmission in the workplace. I know everyone is thinking about that, and that's top of mind. Things like including increasing ventilation and guidance around worksite disinfection. Employee sanitation guidelines and recommendations are also part of this chapter. Hygiene updates to the work environment. There's some information about contact tracing, which I think some might find interesting, along with isolation protocol. And then some guidance regarding remote working. Not sure if folks on this call have employees who are working remote, but in this chapter, you'll find videos and flyers and things that you can share with your group to help with working from home effectively. And also a workplace safety checklist, which here's the employee sanitation guidelines in the workplace that I spoke to. Some guidelines, recommendations from the CDC and other agencies. So just an example of guidelines that you can use to help promote employee sanitation. And we understand the importance of communicating that, right? Like what are strategies that you can use to communicate expectations about sanitation? And so we won't go through every single bullet, but of course, hand hygiene is important, really underscoring the importance of getting a flu shot, especially during the COVID pandemic. What employees could do if they or their coworker may have symptoms of COVID-19, and then just recommendations of maybe having a website where you can include some of your up-to-date workplace procedures so that employees can have a place that they can reference for when they have questions about procedures and policies. Here's that workplace safety checklist that I had referenced a little bit earlier. And so what's really cool about each chapter is that at the very end, most of the chapters will have a checklist that you can take, maybe even print out and see what might make sense for your group. And I actually should have mentioned before that some chapters may be more relevant than others for your organization, for your business, for your company. And because knowing that, you know, some might resonate more than others, you do maybe want to take the time to look through each chapter and see, you know, this might work for me, this might not. But I think this workplace safety checklist is something that all of us could actually benefit from. And so this is, you know, if there's something you could take away from today, I would say really look at the workplace safety checklist and the checklists that are included at the end of each chapter. Alrighty, so now moving on to chapter 2, again, still related to physical health. What chapter 2 focuses on is testing and returning to work safely. And so chapter 2 will include a roadmap on what to do if an employee has COVID symptoms. What you'll find in chapter 2 are testing protocols for workers, some guidelines for employee screening if, you know, some businesses are choosing to do employee screenings, guidance around sick days. So we've included a slide to provide some more information on how to navigate that. Along with, you know, you'll find in these chapters too that there are Kaiser specific resources that you know, might be beneficial to look at. So here we do go through in this chapter Kaiser's actual medical documentation for leave, just for reference in case that's something that folks are interested in learning more about. Here is here is an example of what you'll find in chapter 2. Again, because the playbook is updated regularly, every few weeks or so, a new version comes out. And so the link that we'll send over to Courtney that I think will be shared with everyone, will have accessing that link will ensure that you are accessing the most updated playbook to make sure that you have the most recent version. And actually, this is a newer slide. The reason why I mentioned that is because this is one that we've added related to COVID-19 diagnostic testing priorities. I know that we've gotten a lot of questions about prioritizing for COVID-19 testing, and so here you'll just find more information about not only Kaiser's testing and care information, but just how the CDC has been prioritizing testing during this time. I mentioned employee screening guidance earlier on, and some of the key takeaways for that. If employers are choosing to screen, you must screen everyone with the same role equally. And any mandatory medical tests of employees should be job related and consistent with business necessity. I think most might already know employers may take employees' temperatures at the work site. And then also employers may require COVID-19 tests, and you can also ask employees if they are experiencing any COVID-19 systems. All of this to say that all information must be kept separate and secure. And regarding on-site temperature screening process and resources, here are some resources and also considerations to make when taking temperatures at the work site. So you'll find, if this is something you're interested in learning more about, you can learn more about who can take temperatures, what are some of the safety, privacy, and employee relation concerns and considerations to keep in mind. What are some details about PPE or personal protective equipment that should be top of mind when thinking about conducting on-site temperature screening checks. And then, of course, physical distancing, and then keeping in mind with all of that privacy considerations. And with that, those were the first two chapters, again, focusing on the physical health of employees. And I'm actually going to now pass it on to Brianne, who will take the remaining chapters.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and review chapters 3 through 7. You saw the initial slide that showed you the topics, but for chapter 3, what we'll do is focus on mental health and emotional well-being. This chapter, it really does have a large focus on how to deal with mental health and emotional well-being in the workplace. And you'll see, as it states here on the slide, that COVID-19 and the shelter-in-place orders have had a significant impact on employees' mental health. And so the developers of this playbook really took that into consideration, knowing that, we had to anticipate a surge in mental health symptoms, recognizing the importance of building and reinforcing a psychologically healthy workspace, and then also just making sure that we're sharing best practices around, how to make sure that your employees know what resources are available to them, whether it be through the employer or through community resources. We know that there are unique stressors for different work populations, whether the employees were essential workers and they've continued to work the entire time throughout this COVID pandemic, or if they were once working at a facility and had to switch over to working remotely, the stressors that come along with that, and then in some cases even being furloughed. So we'll talk about some resources that are available to the employee population. All right, so if we look at this slide here, I'm going to go out of order just a little bit. I wanted to first start off with some information about available resources. So if we look at that first bullet point at the top, ensuring access to robust mental health services, we really want to make sure that if you are in a position where you're offering your employees a health benefits package that includes mental health services, help them understand how to utilize those. Do they have to get a referral from a primary care physician? Can they call a 1-800 number to get the support that they need? Or what is the process for them to access services, and make sure that it's communicated well? If we jump down to the bottom here, I wanted to make sure that I also highlighted information around self-care tools and resources. So for KP members, Kaiser Permanente members, that can be things in the form of our digital self-care solutions. We have a solution called My Strength. We also have the app Calm that is available. If you go to kp.org, you can learn more information about that. And if you do not have Kaiser Permanente members within your organization, kp.org is still a great resource. They have articles and videos around mindfulness and meditation and stress management that can be tapped into and utilized as part of your communication plan within the organization. And then finally, going back to the middle one there, promoting and making sure that you optimize the services that are available through EAP is really important. Making sure your employees know that, one, it's available, two, what's offered. In these times, there are opportunities to get support with childcare or elder care or legal services if that's something that is needed, or even financial management resources. So clearly indicating what's available to employees is really important when it comes to EAP. As we move to the next slide, if you do not have an EAP, we wanted to make sure that included within this chapter, there are EAP alternatives. So you'll see a list there, what to do if there is a crisis being the first one, and how to contact, or making sure that you know to contact your mental health carrier and inquire about one-on-one mental health services, understanding what community resources are available. And as Jennifer mentioned, within each chapter, there is a checklist and there is a list of resources that are available. So you could open up the full playbook and see what resources are available there. Understanding the medical benefits if you offer those to your employees, as I mentioned previously. Also, if you do not have an EAP, knowing what faith organizations and community resources are available is very important. And then leveraging things like the mental health webinars that are being hosted by multiple organizations right now. I know Kaiser Permanente is hosting them regularly, but so are other groups. So tap into those free resources as well. Okay, as we move on, this is a great slide that I wanted to share. This one is really helping you understand how to steer your employees in the right direction if they are experiencing any characteristics that are displaying concern around mental health conditions. You'll see in this table here that they have employee characteristics listed at the top. They can be under well, so there's really no concern there, just making sure that they are keeping fit, eating right, and relaxing, and then all the way over to severe. And so if you're seeing employees who are displaying characteristics in the mild space, then it tells you at the bottom there what the employer response can be. So for example, if we look at what's happening in the severe space, if an employee is displaying constant and disabling distress, or if they are having depressive thoughts or severe anxiety and they're sharing that with you, then encouraging them to seek medical treatment is important. And so you'll see a breakdown for each of the employee characteristics for each, as well as the employee responses that we have deemed appropriate. Okay. So moving on to our next chapter, and this one is specific to COVID and the impacts that it has had on social drivers of health. Social drivers of health are really the focus area that we like to look at when it comes to health outcomes and how where you live, work, and play impact your health outcomes. So you'll see a few key takeaways listed there, but the goal of this chapter is to really normalize the conversation around having, discussions about need and assistance. It can be uncomfortable for employees to have that conversation with their employers or any colleagues, but finding ways to normalize that is important. So there's some guidance within this chapter that'll help with that. It also helps with just understanding that social and economic needs impact employee productivity. So as an employer, what can you do to make sure that you are supporting your employees in the communities that they are living in and working in and where they, socialize? Okay. On this slide, you'll see that social drivers of health, they actually account for up to 40% of health outcomes. So in the image here, you'll see at the top, we've got the image of the man here, or the woman, it could be a woman as well. At the top, it's 40% social economic factors. So those are things like education and job status and income and, how safe they feel in their community. Health outcomes are also driven by the physical environment, the health behaviors. We also call these modifiable risk factors because these are things that you can change or improve, like diet and exercise or tobacco use or sexual activity or alcohol use. Those are all things that can be modified by an individual. And then lastly, there's healthcare that accounts for about 20% of an individual's health outcomes. And that would be like access to care. Is it easy for them to get to a physician when they need that support, or are there transportation barriers or things of that nature? And if so, what can you do to help support them in getting to the help that they need? Moving on to the next slide, we wanted to make sure that you were aware of a Thrive Local. That's a partnership that Kaiser Permanente has with Unite Us, where we have basically launched a very comprehensive social health network in 2019. So we're working on rolling that out over a 3-year period to all of our KP regions and communities that we serve. And so you'll see things listed here where individuals can get support with housing and shelter and childcare and financial assistance and the full list that you see there. And if you do not have Kaiser Permanente members, there is also a list of resources off to the right here where they can find help at findhelp.org or 211.org or helpwhenyouneedit.org as well. And each of these are just really social health network. So if they have a certain need like childcare, they can go to that particular website, type in their location and see a list of community resources that they can contact to get help or support. And then for Kaiser Permanente members, we also have our national call center where they can call in for help as well. All right, now moving on to Chapter 5. Chapter 5 really starts to take a deeper dive into HR's role. And we know HR plays a huge role in supporting their employees. And so this chapter really reiterates the importance of looking at the internal policies to make sure that they represent the times that we're living in. And if not, making modifications if need be, or creating policies that support a safe and healthy return to work. So as we move on to the next slide, you'll see a list of benefits plans listed off to the left there. And then there is a list of HR policies and protocols listed there as well. And what you want to do is just identify which ones are still current and relevant and which ones need adjustment, whether it be temporary or long-term shifts in your approach. And if you do not have the HR policies and protocols like this robust list here, then it's really important to also make sure you're having conversations with your employees to make sure that the environment is still supportive and conducive to their work-life balance. Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide here. This one just reiterates the importance of making sure that you're sharing updates with your employees. So much is changing on a daily basis. So creating communication channels, using existing communication channels. If you have a union presence, making sure that you're connecting with your union partners to have consistent messaging to all members and repeating the communication so that everyone feels like they're in the know and staying up to date. So that's really the importance of this slide here. All right. So chapter 6, as we look at this chapter, it really starts to look at the regulatory and legislative guidance at a federal and local level. And so it's all about reinforcing the safe and, safe and healthy work practices. And so it offers best practices around regulatory guidance for each of our KP regions. And so you'll see a couple of key takeaways here that are recommended for all employers, really, is to review the White House's 3-phase approach to individual and business guidelines, making sure that you're checking in with what the guidance is at a state level and then also at a county level, because we know things are different for each county. Okay. What we included on this next slide here is specific to the California region. As I mentioned in the last slide, we have 8 Kaiser Permanente regions, and you'll find information on all of those. But for the purpose of today, we just wanted to include information around California. So you'll see regulatory guidance that's provided by Cal OSHA. If you're looking for information around protecting workers from coronavirus, there's also information on disability and employment. If you have questions around workers' compensation coverage, there are all these great links that you can tap into if you visit the playbook. Okay. And this last chapter here, chapter 7, really goes into industry spotlights. And so you'll see industry specific health and safety guidance for each of the industries that are listed here. So Jennifer named off a few earlier, but we've got manufacturing, we've got some for district and school administration, grocery and essential retail, construction, hospitality. So hopefully one of those will fit your business, or you can pull things from other checklists that are available within this specific chapter and apply it to your organization if you see that it fits. As we continue on to the next slide, what we've included here was information around grocery and essential retail workers. You'll see that there are 9 bullet points listed here. And what this is basically just considerations that can help reduce the risk of coronavirus. So there are some that are more basic and some that are more specific. If you look at the first bullet point there, like allowing employees to wear masks over their noses and mouths to prevent the spread of the virus. That's pretty basic at this point. But things more specific to this industry would be something like encouraging customers to use touchless payment options. So definitely take a look at the industry spotlight that is more appropriate for your business, because each of the guidelines will have a bit of a different look and feel depending on the industry. Okay. One thing I did mention a couple of slides back was that we did have industry-specific information on district and school administration. Well, we know schools, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about returning to schools. How is it going to happen? It's looking different, in every state, in every county. And so our Thriving Schools partners within Kaiser Permanente actually have developed with, in partnership with Alliance for Healthier Generation, a playbook for planning for the next normal at school. So we released the mental health and emotional well-being chapter a few weeks ago, and then just 2 days ago, we actually released the full playbook. So now you will find information around building on clinical guidance for COVID-19 prevention. There is some information within the playbook around implementing strategies to safely provide physical education, which is going to be a barrier in some cases. There's also information around social drivers of health within the school playbook, excuse me. And then there's also information around enhancing teacher and staff well-being. And one thing I really like about this playbook is that all 5 chapters have what they're calling the starter plays. And so they come with a checklist that will look at specifically, for example, let's say mental health and emotional well-being for a school or a school district. And each of the 5 starter plays will have a list of strategies that you can implement to help support the mental health and emotional well-being for staff and students. So as you go through the checklist, you can see, okay, we're doing this, or maybe we need to focus on, doing this a bit more in some cases. So we highly recommend and encourage you to check out the playbook. And then we will be hosting a webinar later this afternoon. So if you have not had an opportunity to register for that and you are interested, we may have some spots still available. But what I did want to let you know is that it will be recorded and it will be posted on our Thriving Schools website. I have shared the Thriving Schools website with Courtney, so you can definitely listen to that if the school setting is something, you know, that touches you or impacts you and you're interested in that. Okay. So that is the end of our overview of the playbook. And so what we'd like to do now is have you, ask you to please complete a survey. If you open the camera on your phone and just hover over the QR code here, is if you were going to take a picture of it, there will be a bar that will pop up at the top of the screen on your phone. Click on that bar, and then if you can move through the questions for us and just let us know how we did today, we would greatly appreciate it. Once it opens, what you'll want to include is the event number 15. And then you'll have to make sure that you input today's date as it's listed on the slide, 07-22-2020. Otherwise, it will pop up as invalid. So I will give you all a moment to scan the QR code, and then we will move into questions and answers.
Thanks, Brianne. That was great. And as folks are completing that survey, I also wanted to share, you know, we mentioned that the playbook is getting updated regularly, almost on a bi-weekly or every other week, maybe, you know, basis. But I know that the next iteration will have some information about office workers in Chapter 7. And so what's really interesting is that we want to hear from you. We want to incorporate your thoughts and your input. And so completing the survey will help us make sure that we're improving and including the right information for you. But yes, I did want to mention that that will be a new addition. So office workers, and I think that might pertain or be relevant for some of the tech businesses out there too. But that's one thing I wanted to add, Brianne.
Great, thank you, Jennifer.
And it should be a fairly quick survey. So I think, you know, we can, if it makes sense to then pivot to Q&A, maybe we can start that conversation.
I'm right there with you. Thanks, Jennifer. So Courtney, we can hand it over to you.
Sounds good. Well, thank you both so much. Thank you, all four of you, actually, for such a great introduction and great overview of this fabulous playbook you've put together. It sounds like a lot of time and effort and attention to detail went into this. So thank you again for sharing that with us and giving us that, you know, what we need to know right here, right now. So that was great. Really appreciate it. If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and submit them to the Q&A, or if you'd like, you can just raise your virtual hand. To do that, you'll have that option on the side of your screen. And there's no one in line. So you would be the first up if you raised your hand. No pressure there. But in the meantime, I guess I'll ask a question. So if anyone would like to answer, go for it. Just what advice would you have for a business that might be a little unsure about reopening, or they're just feeling, you know, overwhelmed? There's so much information out there. What advice would you give them? Anyone can answer.
I mean, I can.
Oh, okay, Dee, go ahead.
This is just broad. I think that focusing on safety first for yourself, your employees, and your patrons. I think the playbook is great. I think looking at the environment to determine how and if and to what degree you can keep yourself safe, your employees safe, and your patrons safe. And so I would recommend, if they're on the fence, how easily can that be done? And of course, like all businesses, it's the cost benefit analysis, right? Is how much business can I generate and still maintain the safety of all of those people who come in and out of my service, and the ease of which my employees feel comfortable when they come to work every day, knowing that their interests are being maintained and their safety is being maintained and they're not taking anything home to their family. So, I mean, I'm a nurse, and I always think of safety and infection and disease prevention first, and those are sort of the ABCs of anything. So that would be my suggestion.
That's great. And Dee, I just would love to add to that if I can. For my perspective, my recommendation would be to definitely check on the county guidance, because we know that sometimes the county's guidance can be a bit more restrictive than the state's guidance. And so you just want to make sure that if you're reopening, you're doing it in a way that won't, generate any fines or anything like that. You want to make sure you stay connected to what's happening at a local level.
Thank you so much. I just added to the chat. If anyone has any questions about that are clinical in nature or related to schools reopening, as our presenters mentioned, there are links. I added them to the chat, and I also will be sending out a follow-up email along with a recording of this webinar. So in case you missed anything or you want to go back, you're able to check that out as well. And it looks like we don't have any other questions for now. So to respect everyone's time, we will go ahead and conclude this event. Peter, do you have anything else, or do any of our speakers have anything else they'd like to add before we go ahead and sign off for this event? If not, that's fine too.
Well, then let me just jump in and say that I too want to thank Kaiser Permanente for the presentation today and for providing really a great resource for returning to work safety. Of course, I also want to give special thanks to your entire team of frontline heroes for all of your work in keeping us all healthy, especially during such challenging times. I also want to thank Facebook for their support and sponsorship of our Back to Business series. We will be posting a recording of this presentation online, as Courtney mentioned. Please watch our newsletter and social media for our next Back to Business session. And thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. You all have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one, everyone. Remember to wash
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.